All right. Now we are bonus podcast episode time here at The Wealthy Ironworker. So while I was doing some show notes, I was compartmentalizing, I was organizing, if you will, article and podcast topics. And I've got well over 100 at this point that I was kind of putting into, all right, is it the Wealth series, the Principle series? I've got a whole long series called the What series, which is, what is this? What is that? What is a defined benefit, defined contribution? What is a collective bargaining agreement, and whatever, all that stuff. I also have another series, and if you follow along with me on the website, at the beginning of each year, I set goals for that whole year to kind of pursue. One of them being in 2024 was, okay, well, let's expand the book review series, and the basic reason behind that is I want to read more and I want to review more, because reviewing something, at least for me anyway, helps me to be able to articulate better what I just got done reading. And it helps to promote, I think, some really good books. And so I was looking at that list, and I already knew this list was rather long, but I was pretty surprised at just how many books over the course of a couple of months that I had kind of, listed out, who the authors were. Many of them I've come across. Some of them I got on a used bookstore and otherwise, and some of them I still need to get. But the list is long and it's growing. List of books that I want to read, push out, and kind of review or whatever. And it prompted me to do this short podcast episode where I got a question for you. And the question is this: when is the last time that you read a good book? And if you read a bad book, then you intuitively know the difference between reading a really good one and one that's subpar in quality and content. But it still begs the question: when is the last time that you read a good book? Now, in that book review series, as part of the 2024 goals pushing out, I was doing a little bit of research, and I kind of stumbled across something that I already knew, but I wanted the statistical data to kind of back me up and to talk about it from a bonus podcast episode. Now, you can go over to any of the review series for 2024, whether it's January review all the way through this December. And I kind of leave that part in the review just to kind of give somebody who might be landing on that article and doesn't know about, what we got going on. They don't have to go surfing through it. They can see at the end of each month, whether they pick January, July, December, whatever, they're going to see the same stats. I don't want to have to go hunt for stuff. But if you go there, you'll find these stats, which I'm going to talk about in this bonus podcast episode. Like, for example, 50%, half of Americans, and this is pretty shameful actually, but 50% are unable to read at an 8th grade level. So in other words, half of the country then is unable to read an 8th grade level book, to tie into the theme of, when's the last time you read a good book? Half the populace is unable to read an 8th grade level book. So much for education is key. And it also blows up the narrative, right? That the more money you toss at education, the greater the educational quality is going to be. This is emphatically not true. We would do well to kind of pump the brakes, take a few steps back, and reevaluate what we're getting and what we're doing. I think we need to look at what brings in value, not just can we throw more dollar signs to whatever it is, especially when 50% of the people in this country are unable to, for one reason or the other, read an 8th grade level book. It's pretty dismal as far as I'm concerned. 33%. Now, I already kind of knew this, but I wanted to put a number to this statistic. 33% of U.S. high school grads never read another book. You graduate high school and you go on into your regular life and you might read. I mean, I'm looking for my phone here. We use our phones all the time, and I'm kind of fond of holding it up and talking about it in multiple podcasts. We use it all the time for entertainment purposes. What we don't use in this technology at our fingertips, the vastness of it all, what we don't use is technology to educate us, to help us aggregate data, and to be able to compile it for use later, and whatever it happens to be, right? I specifically talk about this in some of the regular podcast episodes when it comes to talking about opportunity and how you should pursue opportunity. But to find out what it is, you need to do a lot of research. And the internet makes it, I mean, it's so much better than having to go to the high school library, if you will, or a public library for that matter, and rely on somebody else and some gatekeepers who might compile information. You have an unprecedented amount of information that's available online at your fingertips. And we use technology to an amazing degree. We use it for entertainment purposes. And again, I'm not trying to diminish or, kind of dismiss entertainment. It's nice to laugh. All I really am saying is there's so much more that it can be used. And when 33% of people, I know it says high school, but I'm inclined to think that two things. Number one, I'm inclined to think that number is higher. It's probably 40 some percent going forward. And then if we added, the totality of college graduates as well, if that's the path that you actually went, it's probably very similar, especially considering the narrative today that you got to go. And so we lower educational quality to allow massive numbers of people to into that educational hierarchy. The numbers are probably pretty consistent. And so at least 33 or a third of all Americans, bar none, will go the rest of their life after getting out of what I would say is government mandated schooling, and they'll never read another book again. That's crazy to me with the wealth of information at our fingertips. How about this one? 50%. All right. 50% of books that are started are never finished. This makes sense to me. I mean, there have been books in the past in my library that I started reading and for one reason or the other did not finish. But the major difference is I've got books galore. As a matter of fact, when we were moving, it's the number one. It was the one thing that weighed more than anything else. Books. I had boxes and boxes of books. As a matter of fact, my wife and I we actually got rid of a few books, more than a few actually, because she had some of the same books that I did when we got married, and we never really went through it until you go to move. You go to move, that's when you find out how much stuff you really have. We have to pack it all in boxes. But according to this, 50% of all books that are started are never finished. And if you are one of the, if you're one of the 2/3 of Americans, so out of the country, 2/3 of Americans actually look to do some reading. Well, then 50% of the books that they actually start never even get finished. Is it a reference book? Is it nonfiction? Is it fiction? What type of book is it? Right? And so 50% or half of all books that are started are never read. Now, 80% also, 80% of American families have not in the past year purchased a book. And I don't mean a periodical. You might get a magazine that you flip through for the pictures. It's got some captions. I'm talking about a book that we used to read. And the more you read, the more educated you become. You have a lot to learn. And with access to information at our fingertips, the more ability we have to learn. All right. So 80%. So let me run through those again. 50% of Americans are unable to read an 8th grade level book. Pretty dismal. 1/3 or 33% of all U.S. high school graduates never read another book when they graduate high school and move on from government mandated education. They never read another book. Half of all books. So the 2/3 that do read a book, half of the books that are started are never finished, and 80% of families haven't purchased a book in the previous year. And now for those people who actually do read, now you can go on over to the website and you'll be able to go to any one of the reviews and you'll be able to see this statistic. But for those who do read, the statistic runs like this. If you read 7 or more books a year, you are more than 122% likely to be a millionaire. Now, there's some variables out there that doesn't address, right? What types of books? Are we talking fiction? Are we talking, what's likely to be the case is if you're going to read 7 or more books a year, you're probably reading books on leadership, personal development, personal growth, business oriented books, etc., which make perfect sense to me and should make perfect sense to you, my listeners. However, nonetheless, if you read 7 or more, what are you doing? You're actually learning and you're consuming knowledge over and over again. So if you are doing that, then you are more than 122% more likely to be a millionaire than the rest. And it reminds me of a quote that I heard Jim Rohn say, and I'm going to paraphrase it, but it was, strive to get $1 million, not for the $1 million, but what it will make of you to get there. And this is part of it. Reading, developing. Right now, I can hear some people automatically, they're throwing up roadblocks and stumbling blocks and saying, "Hey, listen, man, I don't have time to read a book or whatever." I get that. Number one, I would say that we make time for what's important to us, and if it's important to grow and to become more educated and learn more, then you will make time for it. Number two, what I would also say is that you're listening to this podcast, which, by the way, thank you. But podcasts are in some ways very similar to the audiobook format. And I didn't write this statistic down for this podcast episode, but when you look at the website, the users, the number of people who are on for audiobooks has skyrocketed over the past several years. And number three, there's never been an easier way to read books, whether it's through the Kindle app or online. Quite recently, I started picking back up again through Kindle the Sherlock Holmes book that I downloaded for free. The writing is stellar. The stories are intriguing. It's very long and substantive, but it's nice to read anyway. There are multiple ways then for you to be able to read, consume, educate yourself via a book. So I end the podcast episode with this important question. When is the last time that you read a good book? Think about that. Think about all the books that are out there. And if you want some recommendations about what type of books I think or other people might be able to offer to you about which books are substantive in nature and help you grow your business, your personal life, family, etc., you can go over to the contact page. You can drop me a line and we can sit here and communicate. All right? So, when's the last time you read a book? And if it hasn't been a while, why not? Never been a better time. Join me throughout the year. Read good books, read good authors, learn, grow. See you on the next one.